As some of you know, I post a plethora of polls on my community tab. Some are weird, some are boring, and others are meant to gauge opinions on serious topics before I make a video on it. A while ago, I posted a question, is the trans movement anti-gay? After coming across a video discussing the topic. The person in the video laid out reasons why some people believe that the trans movement is anti-gay. Personally, I didn't find her point solid enough to justify that claim, but a lot of people did. One of the main arguments she brought up was that some lesbians and gay people feel like their identities are being invalidated because of the idea that they should be open to dating trans people. But wholeheartedly, who's pressuring you? A video from the CEO of a lesbian dating app saying that trans women are welcome on the platform does not infringe on your right to date whoever you want. Even if your algorithm is flooded with LGBTQ+ couples that includes a trans person, that's not the same thing as being forced into anything. Trans people make up less than 1% of the population in America, so I cannot stress this enough. It is very, very, very easy to find and date a cis person without extremists with the misshapen idea of what harmful transphobia is yapping in your ear. Since I make similar content to that creator in the video, I wanted to get a sense about how my audience felt about the topic. The majority vote was no, it's not anti-gay, which reassured me that most people, at least most of my audience, understand that those movements aren't at odds. But I did get some people who believe that I shouldn't have even asked the question or that I was trolling. I do troll in some of my community posts, but this was not one of them. It is a real serious belief that a surprising amount of people believe in. Maybe they don't watch me, but they find each other in online spaces like that video. Some also felt uncomfortable with the topic being discussed at all. Hey queen, these are some low-key really harmful rhetoric to spread on the internet. Maybe this really isn't a question that should be asked, you know? Human rights aren't really up for debate. I agree with parts of their statements since, yeah, human rights shouldn't be up for debate. But this question wasn't really about whether trans people deserve rights. It was about the perception, true or not, that some trans people are pressuring others to redefine their identities or dating preferences. For example, some butch lesbians or studs have been told they must be trans simply because of how they present. And while I personally know that isn't the goal of trans activism, not everyone does. Asking these questions in general isn't inherently pushing a harmful agenda. The internet is full of misinformation, and ignoring these conversations doesn't make them go away, because it just forces people to find their answers elsewhere, which generally means going to conservative spaces, where those arguments are treated as fact instead of just personal opinion. Some people are so confident that the trans movement is anti-gay. Therefore, wouldn't it be wiser to openly discuss and confront their viewpoints? So many people commented on that poll explaining why they believe that the trans movement isn't anti-gay, and maybe, just maybe, some of those points actually change someone's mind. There are always people who already agree with me and have always aligned with the points I bring up, but then there are others who don't initially agree with me, who might even be skeptical or resistant to these conversations, and yet because I choose to openly talk about these topics, I manage to change minds. You can't change perspectives if you refuse to engage with them. Getting people to accept certain ideas involves addressing issues head-on and offering others a fresh viewpoint, not dismissing questions that you believe should be obvious. Even when the question doesn't have an obvious answer, sometimes the reaction depends more on who's asking it than the question itself. A few months ago, I made a video discussing racism within and against the Black community in America specifically. I don't really like that video anymore since my phrasing in that just seems immature to me now, even though it was less than a year ago. But at the time, I specified that I wasn't trying to praise or criticize Black issues because I was just asking questions since I noticed a major divide in how certain topics were perceived within the Black community. The initial feedback was actually really insightful. A lot of people shared different perspectives, even if they didn't agree with me, and it led to some great discussions and led me to my new opinions too. But a couple months later, I started getting a new wave of criticism. Some people just didn't like the idea of a non-Black person discussing these topics at all. I don't know why you, clearly a white chick, feel like you can speak on this issue, but go off. They got my race wrong, but we can ignore that part. Others just felt like I was speaking on behalf of Black people because I referenced my own interactions with Black friends and family to illustrate certain points. What a weird thing to joke about. Could care less if you was being facetious. Man, that's a tongue twister. Could care less if you was being facetious or not. Don't confuse your proximity to some Black people with having a permit to engage in our inter-communal issues. Mind your business and focus on the white supremacists in your group. For context, the joke they're referring to was from a story I told about a conversation I had with a Black male friend. I had initially joked with him, it's weird how the people who hate Black women the most are Black men. And as a Black man, he chose to respond with, because they're ratchet as fuck. He then went on to say that he only liked Black women when they act like white women. Since I posted post online, I think it's pretty obvious that minding my own business isn't exactly my strong suit. So after those comments he made, we actually had a serious conversation about why he would say something like that, especially when I know that he knows that he loves black women who don't act white. His friends, his family are deeply connected to their culture. They use slang, mannerisms, and traditions that are distinctively non-white. Yet he still respects and admires them. So clearly, it wasn't actually about how black women act, so it just seemed more like he was repeating opinions he got from others, opinions he obviously didn't believe. Do you think I should have kept my mouth shut just because I'm not black? Do you think I should have waited for him to say something disrespectful in front of our mutual black female friends or one of his family members so they could rip into him instead? I don't really speak up anymore when a non-black person says the N-word because I don't believe it's my place to police that word. But would that logic apply here too? The joke I made was specifically referencing colorism within the black community. But colorism doesn't just affect black people because it also has a ripple effect on other communities of color, including dark-skinned Asians. And I'm not talking about like different cultural beauty standards or preferences because anti-blackness is so deeply ingrained in so many different cultures that it shapes the way different racial groups view each other. To give an example from my own life again, I asked one of my Afro-Asian friends if they experience any anti-blackness from older Asian people because there is a lot of anti-blackness in Asian spaces. But they actually said that older Asians are usually just happy to see another Asian in non-predominantly Asian spaces. But the general societal racism they do experience is from Afro-American men who don't like dark-skinned women. Obviously, her experience doesn't mean that anti-blackness in Asian communities don't exist at all. It does, but my point is that colorism doesn't stay confined to just one racial group. Colorism quite literally creates intersections of discrimination where people of color are both the targets and sometimes the perpetrators of anti-blackness. If I were to only talk about how people's internalized anti-blackness affects some Asian people, I feel like the conversation would shrink into individual prejudice, which completely misses the bigger picture of how larger cultural and historical forces that condition people of color to see each other through the lens of white supremacy. I just think that so many people severely underestimate how much internalized intolerance they actually have. I recently ran a poll asking, do you think you're sexist? Most people responded with no, or at least I don't think so. If you're curious about my answer, I know I'm sexist. I'm not proud of it, but I fully acknowledge that I've internalized biases just like everyone else, because no one really grows up in a completely neutral bubble free from societal influence. Like this guy, he seems to agree with me with the fact that I am indeed sexist, but his proof that I'm sexist is through my weird hypothetical polls. Some of these examples that he's showing aren't even gendered. Like when I asked if someone was walking towards you at night, what would you do? I never specified gender in that post. Or when I asked who are you more likely to believe in situations of blame like SA abuse or shooting a CEO in the head, I also never specified gender. Or when I asked would you rather be stuck alone in the basement with a rat or a person, I actually specified that gender was random. He only showed 2 real examples where I asked questions based on gender, and I'll be honest, those were just questions that I thought of while driving. I wasn't really planning on using them for anything, but let's use them for this video. In the first example he showed was the poll, if you were an average teenager who had to go through a maze with either 50 horny men or 50,000 rats, which would be harder / which would you pick? I messed up my phrasing which contradicted itself, so the results don't mean anything, but in the post I gave extra notes to consider. I presented rats to be greater in number, always hostile, harder to detect, and relentless. I still presented the men in this question to be human. Men are still complex. They always have a choice, and that choice could also be to protect and help you in this maze. And I wanted people to acknowledge that, because I know that some of my audience are scared of men, and some of them assume that all men are bad because they are men, but that's not true. I don't know if this guy knows it's true, considering...
I don't know if I should have to explain this, but this is what men are biologically supposed to do, lust over women. So I don't know what to tell you, just don't exist.
First off, that's not how biology works. There is zero scientific evidence that men are hardwired to objectify women. Sexual attraction to women is something that a lot of people have, but reducing women to objects is a learned behavior. But sure, you're just a weak little mindless horny animal that can't control yourself because that's what you think men do. But the actual vast majority of men are not so unbearably horny and bitter that they somehow both sexualize women because they clearly want to sleep with them, while also hating them just because they have personalities. The second post he highlighted was, would you rather have an I don't care if they already have a girlfriend / wife daughter, or a sends unsolicited dick pic son? Again, I messed up my phrasing, so we're not going to look at the results. However, I want to clarify that this question itself wasn't meant to be sexist. The intention behind the question was to contrast 2 equally problematic behaviors, not to make a gendered statement. If it was, I could have very easily stopped at, would you rather have a son or a daughter? It could also have been very easily flipped, like a son disregarding relationship boundaries, or a daughter sending her news without the receiver's permission. question. I meant the focus to be on comparing two specific actions, not making a generalization about men or women. I meant to paint the homeworker as also a harasser because a lot of people who don't respect relationship boundaries don't really seem to care about regular boundaries either. I wholeheartedly can understand how this specific one could be misunderstood to be sexist because I phrased it wrong, and it could be very easily viewed as a gender bias. But to be honest, I don't think I can take this person seriously considering all the other examples were invalid and based on his own internalized bias. How do I know that he has an internalized bias? Well, this person did also make a diss track of me. He made a post a few weeks ago saying that he'll make a diss track of me if that video got 10 likes. It didn't get 10 likes, but I appreciated his work ethic of doing it anyways. He posted the diss track with an AI voice of Drake singing the song he wrote.
Alive, like it's something you owe. You ain't speaking facts, just pushing an agenda. Acting like a queen, but you just pretender.
Pathetic and boring insults aside, this guy who's calling me a sexist against men is using the voice of a guy who made fun of a male rape victim. If we were in a Who Hates Men More contest, I think I would be going home with a participation trophy. I may have internalized transphobia, racism, or sexism because, like a lot of people, I was raised by opinionated adults who also have these biases. Like, I specifically was raised in an extremely conservative and Mormon town, so I already know what it's like to ask questions and get shut down immediately. But asking genuine questions isn't what makes someone intolerant or a threat. If you watch my videos, you might get a general grasp of my personality, how I think, how I speak, and who I accept based on the statements I make. But you can't determine the kind of person I am from the questions I ask. The range of the topics of those questions might imply that I have ADHD, but still, questions aren't declarations of beliefs. They're just an expression of curiosity or a desire to understand. Even if those questions are in video form, they don't suddenly become proof of intolerance. You can't deflect my questions to ask me why I'm not more focused on this other topic just because you don't know how to answer it. That's how you create censorship. Censorship is not just government officials blocking content from new outlets. It also happens when people shame or discourage others from asking questions simply because the topic is uncomfortable. People are already incredibly ignorant on certain topics. It's not always intentional or malicious because sometimes they've just never had the opportunity to learn. But if they're not allowed to ask questions, they stay ignorant. It turns into misunderstanding, assumptions, fear, and sometimes hatred. We have to allow others to ask questions, including the wrong ones, if we genuinely want them to grow as people. Shutting someone down only isolates their ignorance and lets it fester rather than correcting it. And I personally would much rather have an uncomfortable conversation with someone for a few minutes than having them hold on to those opinions and have them spread those opinions without even acknowledging why they're harmful. But I don't know, that's just me. Laters.